Zola stood before the grand gates of the Majiwa kingdom, her heart pounding in her chest. The guards recognized her instantly, bowing deeply as they opened the massive gates to let her in. Her reputation had preceded her as a trusted aide and warrior who had served the late Princess Nea with unyielding loyalty. King Aloma had summoned her urgently, and Zola knew it was because of the tragedy that had befallen his daughter. The circumstances of Prince Nea's death were covered in mystery, but one thing was clear: her death had made King Aloma so angry that it could bring destruction to the kingdoms involved. Zola's mind raced as she was led through the rich corridors of the palace. The weight of the situation bore down on her shoulders. She remembered when King Aloma had asked her to leave Prince Nea's side. It was one of the worst days of her life. Finally, she was brought before the king's throne. King Aloma sat there, a towering figure draped in royal robes, his face a mask of barely restrained fury, his eyes, dark and brooding, fixed on Zola as she approached and knelt before him. "Rise, Zola," the king commanded, his voice cold and firm. Zola obeyed, standing before him with her head bowed in respect. She could feel the tension in the room, the eyes of the court officials and guards watching her every move. "Do you know why I have summoned you?" King Aloma asked, his voice low but laced with anger. "Yes, your majesty," Zola replied, her voice steady despite the fear nagging at her. "It is about Princess Nea." King Aloma's fist clenched on the armrest of his throne. "My daughter is dead because of Queen Nandi. That woman is responsible for my daughter's death. She herded you away, knowing full well the danger that my daughter faced, and now she will pay for her arrogance." Zola remained silent, sensing that the king's wrath was not yet fully unleashed. She knew better than to interrupt him when he was in such a state. King Aloma rose from his throne, towering over Zola as he stepped closer. "I want you to infiltrate Zaruba. I want you to gain the trust of Queen Nandi and her husband, King Ezana. They have never seen your face, so you'll be a stranger to them. But your eyes are too familiar. The queen may recognize you from the brief time you looked at her during the duel. We cannot take that risk." Zola looked up at him, her eyes widening in realization. "What do you suggest, your majesty?" King Aloma motioned to one of his advisors, who stepped forward holding a small vial of liquid. "This is a potion prepared by our most skilled herbalist. It will change the color of your eyes. You must take it every night without fail, or the effect will wear off. With this, you'll be unrecognizable to Queen Nandi." Zola took the vial, her hand trembling slightly as she accepted it. She knew what this mission entailed. It was a path of deception, one that would require her to suppress her guilt and her conscience. But she was ready to avenge her best friend no matter what. "I will do as you command, your majesty," Zola said, bowing her head once more. King Aloma's expression softened, but only slightly. "Good. Once you have gained their trust, you will report back to me with all the information you can gather about their kingdom's defenses. We will strike when the time is right, and we will bring Zaruba to its knees." Zola nodded, determination settling in her heart. She would do whatever it took to complete the mission, to atone for the death of Princess Nea. Zola set out for Zaruba the next day, determined and focused on her mission. She traveled alone as ordered, to avoid attracting attention. The journey was long and difficult, taking her through dense forests, across raging rivers, and over steep mountain passes. At night, Zola rested alone, reflecting on her mission. Each evening, she took the potion that turned her eyes deep brown into a striking blue, making her look like a stranger in her own skin. To avoid dwelling on the deception she was about to commit, Zola focused on the practical aspects of her mission. She rehearsed her story, crafting a persona that would win the trust of Zaruba's king and queen. She would present herself as a skilled warrior, offering her services to the royal family. A believable cover giving her training, and one that would appeal to the king's need for strong protectors. When she finally reached Zaruba, the kingdom's capital city loomed before her with its towering spires, bustling markets, and grand palaces. The air was filled with the scent of spices, and the streets were alive with the sound of merchants, children playing, and drums echoing from the temples. Zola made her way to the royal palace, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She knew she had to play her role perfectly. One wrong move could ruin everything. As she approached the palace gates, a group of royal guards met her. Their leader, a tall man with a stern expression, stepped forward. "Halt! State your name and purpose," he demanded. Zola bowed and replied, "My name is Zola, a warrior from the far eastern lands. I have traveled far to offer my services to the king and queen of Zaruba." The guard eyed her cautiously, but her confident demeanor and wary appearance seemed to convince him. He nodded and signaled for the gates to open. "You may enter, but know this: any sign of treachery and you will be dealt with swiftly," the guard warned. Zola nodded, serious. "I understand. Thank you." As she entered the grand courtyard, Zola was awed by the palace's beauty, with its marble columns, lush gardens, and mosaic depicting Zaruba's royal history. But there was little time to admire it. She was soon escorted to the throne room for her audience with the king and queen. The throne room was a grand, impressive space with high ceilings and sparkling chandeliers. The walls were decorated with decorations showing scenes of battles and victories. At the far end of the room sat King Ezana and Queen Nandi, both dressed in their royal robes. As Zola met their eyes, she felt a shiver run down her spine. She could see the sadness in Queen Nandi's eyes, still grieving for her lost children. The king, however, looked strong and alert, his eyes sharp and watchful. Zola bowed deeply, her heart racing. "Your Majesties, it is an honor to stand before you. I am Zola, a warrior from the east, and I have come to offer my loyalty and services to your kingdom." King Ezana looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. "You have traveled far, Zola. Why have you come to Zaruba, and why do you want to serve us?" Zola was ready for this question. "My homeland was destroyed by war, and I lost everything: my family, my home, my people. I have wandered ever since, looking for a place where I can use my skills to protect others. I have heard of Zaruba's greatness, and I believe this is where I am meant to be." Queen Nandi's gaze softened as she listened. "You have suffered much, Zola. We always need strong and loyal warriors to protect our kingdom. But tell me, what skills do you have that would make you valuable to our royal guard?" Zola thought quickly. She needed to impress them. "I am skilled with the blade, Your Majesty," she replied steadily. "I have trained in swordplay, archery, and hand-to-hand combat. I also have experience in strategy and leading troops in battle." The king's interest grew, and he leaned forward slightly. "You say you're a strategist. How would you defend this palace if it were under siege?" Zola quickly analyzed the palace layout and defenses. She described her plan in detail, explaining where she would position the guards, place the archers, and how she would use the palace's natural defenses. As she spoke, she noticed the king nodding, impressed by her knowledge. When she finished, he looked at her with new respect. "You speak like a seasoned warrior," King Ezana said. "We could use someone with your talents. What do you think, Nandi?" Queen Nandi, who had been listening closely, nodded in agreement. "I believe Zola would be a valuable addition to our guards. Let's take her into our services and see how she does." Zola bowed deeply, her heart filled with relief. "Thank you, your majesties. I will serve you faithfully and do my best." Zola quickly became a trusted member of the Zaruba Royal Guards. Her skills were impressive, and soon the other guards admired her. She was disciplined, focused, and always ready to prove herself. But inside, Zola was nervous, knowing her real mission involved deception and betrayal. Queen Nandi grew fond of Zola, admiring her strength and determination. The queen saw a bit of her younger self in Zola. Zola was then made the queen's personal knight, a role of great honor and responsibility. Zola knew this was a key step in her mission. As the queen's personal knight, she had access to the palace's secrets and the queen's trust. But this also meant greater danger. One mistake could reveal her true identity. In her new role, Zola started gathering information about the kingdom's defenses. She learned about the guards' rotations, where the weapons were stored, and the layout of the palace. She also watched the relationships between the royal family and their advisors, looking for any signs of tension. She was not only here to find out about the weaknesses of the kingdom, but also she was there to kill the queen as she sought to avenge Princess Nia. It was a hefty task, but she was ready. Zola's mission became more complicated when Prince Amari, the king and queen's only child, noticed her. Prince Amari was a handsome young man with a charming smile and a playful nature. Known for his love of adventure and flirting, he soon started showing interest in Zola. At first, Zola tried to avoid Prince Amari's attention, knowing that getting close to him would risk her mission. But the prince was persistent, always finding ways to talk to her, compliment her, and invite her on rides through the countryside. Despite her efforts, Zola felt drawn to the prince. He intrigued her with his carefree spirit, genuine kindness, and the way he treated her as an equal, not just as a warrior. One evening, after a long day of training, Prince Amari invited Zola to a private dinner in the palace gardens. Zola hesitated, aware of the risk, but eventually agreed, unable to resist its charm. The dinner was simple: fruits, cheese, and wine laid out on a blanket under the stars. They talked for hours, sharing stories, dreams, and fears. Zola found herself opening up more than she expected, revealing parts of herself she usually kept hidden. As the night went on, the prince moved closer, his gaze intense. Zola's heart raced as he leaned in and kissed her gently. For a brief moment, she let herself get lost in the moment, forgetting her mission and the deception at its core. But reality quickly set in, and Zola pulled away, her mind filled with conflicting emotions. She knew she couldn't afford to get involved with the prince, not when her mission meant betraying his family. The prince, unaware of her inner struggle, took her hesitation as shyness. He smiled warmly and said, "I've never met anyone like you, Zola. You are strong, beautiful, and mysterious. I can't stop thinking about you." Zola's heart ached, knowing they could never truly be together. But she also realized she could use his affection to her advantage. If she gained his trust, she could further her mission. So, Zola let herself fall into the prince's arms, pretending to feel the same way. They spent the night together. While the prince slept peacefully, Zola lay awake, her mind racing. The next morning, Zola knew she had to move fast. She had the prince's trust, and now she needed to use it to finish her mission. She quickly devised a plan to eliminate Queen Nandi without raising suspicion. Zola started to pull away from Prince Amari in the days that followed, knowing she needed to keep her emotions in check to complete her mission. The prince, noticing her growing distance, became desperate for her attention. He showered her with gifts and begged her to spend more time with him. Zola played her part well, pretending to be hesitant while secretly manipulating the prince's feelings. She knew his love for her was her strongest weapon, and she planned to use it against the royal family. One evening, while they were in the palace gardens, Zola gave the prince a small vial of liquid. She told him it was a special drink from her homeland, a rare and powerful potion that would bring good fortune and strength to whoever drank it. Eager to please her, the prince accepted the vial without question. But just as he was about to drink it, Zola stopped him with a playful smile. "Wait," she said gently. "This drink is meant for someone special. I want you to give it to your mother as a sign of my respect and admiration." The prince hesitated, a hint of jealousy in his eyes. "Why can't I drink it?" he asked, half joking but with a possessive tone. Zola's heart raced as she realized the danger. She needed him to give the drink to his mother without making him suspicious. She leaned in closer, her voice calm and persuasive. "Because," she whispered, "your mother is the queen and she deserves to be honored. Don't worry, I have more of this potion. I can give you some later." The prince's jealousy faded and he nodded, his love for Zola overcoming his doubts. "All right, I will give it to her," he said with a smile. "But you have to promise me some next time." Zola forced a smile, her heart pounding. "I promise," she said, hoping she'd never have to keep that promise. But later that night, the prince's jealousy won out. Alone in his chambers, he couldn't resist the urge to drink the potion himself. He convinced himself it was harmless, a simple gesture of respect, not a magic potion. So, the prince drank the potion, unaware it was a deadly poison meant for his mother. Within minutes, he felt the effects, his body racked with pain as the poison spread. He tried to call for help, but his voice was too weak and he collapsed on the floor, struggling to breathe. By the time the palace guards found him the next morning, it was too late. Prince Amari was dead, his body lying lifeless on the cold marble floor of his chambers. The palace descended into chaos, with no one able to explain the young prince's sudden and mysterious death. Queen Nandi was devastated, her grief overwhelming her as she mourned the loss of her only child. She withdrew from everyone, refusing to see even her closest advisors. The once strong queen was now a broken woman, her spirit crushed by the loss of her children. Zola watched the chaos unfold, feeling a mix of guilt and satisfaction. She hadn't meant to kill the prince, but his death worked in her favor. With the royal family in turmoil, she knew the time was right to strike. After weeks of mourning, Queen Nandi finally came out of her isolation. She wanted to understand why her family had suffered so much. She went to see the kingdom's most respected seer, an old man known for his seeing into the past and future. Zola went with the queen to the seer's remote cave, knowing this was a chance to learn more and finish her mission. When they reached the seer's cave, the queen kneeled before him, her voice shaking. "Please, wise one," she pleaded. "Why has my family been cursed? What did we do to deserve this?" The seer looked at the queen with sadness. "You are cursed," he said, "but it's not your fault. Someone else who wants revenge has cursed you." Queen Nandi gasped. Who? Who has done this?" The seer looked briefly at Zola, then back at the queen. "I cannot say," he said, "but you can break the curse if you seek forgiveness from the one you have wronged." The queen's face showed despair. "How can I ask for forgiveness when I don't know who I have wronged?" The seer glanced at Zola again, hinting at something. "The answer might be closer than you think," he said mysteriously. Zola's heart raised as she realized the seer might be suspecting her. She knew she needed to act fast to keep her secret safe. As the queen and Zola were about to leave, the seer pulled Zola aside. "Be careful," he whispered. "The path you are on is dangerous and could lead to your downfall." Zola nodded, her mind racing. She knew she was close to finishing her mission, but also knew she had to be cautious. She couldn't afford any mistakes now. The trip back to Zaruba was tense. Queen Nandi was lost in thought, troubled by what the seer had said. Zola, meanwhile, was focused on a plan to finish her mission and bring down the Zaruba kingdom. When they arrived at the palace, Zola quickly set a plan in motion. She sent a secret message to King Aloma, letting him know that Zaruba was now vulnerable and it was the right moment to attack. Zola continued to act as the queen's loyal knight, but she was always on the lookout for the right moment to kill the queen. She knew that the queen's death would create chaos, making it easier for King Aloma to strike. The chance came during a grand feast for Prince Amari, who had recently died. The whole court was there, and the mood was heavy with mourning. Zola saw her opportunity. As the feast went on, Zola quietly slipped poison into the queen's drink. She held her breath, watching as the queen picked up the goblets, unaware of the danger inside. Just as the queen was about to drink, a loud commotion erupted at the entrance. A messenger rushed in, looking scared, and announced that the kingdom was under attack. The all exploded into chaos as everyone rushed to respond. Zola's heart raised as she realized that the attack had come sooner than expected. She quickly moved to the queen's side, pretending to protect her as they were led out of the hall. In the confusion, Zola seized a chance. She drew a dagger and stabbed the queen in the back. Queen Nandi gasped, shocked to see who was attacking her. "Zola, why?" the queen whispered, her voice weak and pained. Zola felt a pang of guilt, but forced herself to stay cold. "It had to be done," she said without emotion. The queen fell to the ground, her blood spreading around her as she died. Zola stood over her, the feeling heavy-hearted. Her mission was finally complete. With Queen Nandi dead and Zaruba under attack, the kingdom quickly fell apart. King Ezana, overwhelmed by grief, couldn't defend his land against the Majiwa forces. Zola watched from the shadows as Zaruba crumbled, feeling a mix of triumph and sadness. She had completed her mission, avenging Princess Nia and destroying Zaruba. But in the process, she had lost a part of herself, her innocence, her humanity, and the chance to embrace love. That day, Zola walked into King Ezana's chambers. She could feel his pain from afar. He looked disengaged from the world, his body numb. She planned to stay in Zaruba and become a queen to the king. Being a queen was part of her life goals. She just didn't see a way for it to happen, but now there was one. She went to see King Aloma and told him of how she killed the queen and how she wished to stay in Zaruba, get married to the king, and make sure to always help him whenever he wanted. King Aloma loved the idea and totally agreed to it. He wished her well and told her to seek help whenever she wanted. She had done exceedingly well for him, and he would never forget that. Now, the kingdom that used to mock him is now within his grasp. Because of his win against Zaruba Kingdom, it earned him respect and fear from other kingdoms. He couldn't be more satisfied, but he still wished his daughter was with him. He knew it was a pain he would never be able to let go of. One day, Zola walked into King Ezana's chambers. She could feel his pain from afar. He looked disengaged from the world, his body numb like a dead man. "Your Majesty," she greeted. King Ezana raised his head to look at her. He responded with a nod. "Do you need anything, my king? I know the whole thing is too much for you. Let me ease your pain," Zola said as she undressed in front of the king. The king's eyes widened in surprise. He wasn't excited, but caught off guard. Before he could fully process what was happening, he felt Zola's hands gently wrap around him. Her touch was soft but firm, as if she, too, was uncertain but determined. The king's mind raced with conflicting thoughts, telling him to resist, to step back, but he found himself unable to move, the weight of his responsibilities and grief suddenly lifting, leaving him feeling vulnerable and in need of comfort. The soft glow of the candles cast a warm light around them, and the tension in the room gave way to a quiet understanding. They let the night play out, seeking solace in each other, allowing themselves to be guided by a connection that had been building for so long. Zola stayed up that night, feeling satisfied. She looked at the king as he slept soundly by her side. She would make sure she gets the king to marry her, which would make her the queen of Zaruba Kingdom. Hey my lovely viewers, hope you enjoyed that beautiful story. What do you think will happen in the next part? Will Zola finally be caught? Please stay tuned for the next part. Thank you so much for watching.